Hi, my name is Mike Loudenbach, and I'm a PhD student in rhetoric at Carnegie Mellon University. And I want to pick up where Dave left off to discuss how we can use DocuScope in our analysis of student writing. Specifically, we've been collecting student papers across all levels of courses in the discipline of statistics and data science at CMU. So for novice students, and especially those from less privileged educational backgrounds, access to genre knowledge might not be as readily apparent. So DocuScope can help researchers and instructors assess patterns of student writing and compare them to the kinds of writing in the target genres that students will be expected to write in the future, whether in upper-level academic work or workplace contexts. So we used DocuScope to tag our student writing data, and with the DocuScope output, we combined our statistics corpus with the writing from MyCusp, or the Michigan Corpus of Upper-Level Student Papers, and performed a multidimensional analysis. So using DocuScope categories, we can describe the variation in the disciplinary register of our statistics corpus alongside the disciplines of MyCusp and plot them along the two dimensions that our analysis returned according to their corresponding scores. And so I'll zoom in a bit so we can read this better. Here we can see statistics nestled between physics, biology, and engineering, and the DocuScope categories that correlate negatively to this dimension include academic writing moves, so phrases like "we hypothesize," "we found that," or "this study." Information change, which includes words like variable and increase, and the other category is academic terms, so more technical language and terms related to math. So the fact that these three categories describe our corpus along dimension 1 makes sense since we see it near other mathematically oriented disciplines. Dimension 2, however, shows statistics far from the other disciplines on the negative end of this dimension. And here it's characterized by categories like inquiry and academic writing moves, again, as well as reasoning language. But perhaps more interestingly, it's characterized by the absence of some of the categories at the positive end of this dimension. So things like narrative immediacy, facilitating language, character names. So we're getting much more narrative functions on the positive end and not as much in the discipline of statistics on the negative end. So what DocuScope offers us through this MDA is a starting point for describing disciplinary writing in statistics. So we can look at tokens from each of the characteristic DocuScope categories in context to get a better sense of the rhetorical moves that these writers are making. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a keyword analysis of an introductory statistics course called Reasoning with Data, or 36200. Students write 2 papers in 36200, and for each of those papers, they're given a sample paper by the instructor that they can use to guide them along with the prompt as they write their analyses. And their task is to write a formal academic report that tackles 3 hypotheses that they have come up with based on the data sets that they're given. So David Brown tagged the writing for part of speech, and we used R to perform a keyword analysis using a log likelihood test to measure keyness. So in this case, our target corpus is 36200. We have over 300 papers there. And for the reference corpus, we either used the other papers from our student corpus, or we used about 125 published articles that come from journals that tend to do more theoretical statistics. We're working on expanding a corpus to include more applied statistics and maybe even some public-facing writing about data as well. But whether we use the other student writing as our reference corpus or our published articles as our reference corpus, the keywords remain the same. So overall, the keyword analysis confirmed that students are relying on the linguistic patterns in the sample papers as templates for their own writing. And what I want to do now is walk you through some of the keywords that really illustrate this for us. And if we filter for key adverbs, our top key adverb is below. And here you can see some instances of below in the context of student papers. And the students are referring to figures and tables based on their position on the page itself. Whereas in the published corpus, authors tend to use the word below to refer to written content that comes later in the paper, but not to the positioning of figures or tables on the page, especially if some of these expert writers, whether they're writing in LaTeX or whether they're aware that some of the formatting might change during publication, they're careful not to use below in order to denote the position of a particular table or figure on the page. And what's also interesting about this is that the word above does not appear on our keyword list, and so this clearly shows us that students are using below in this way based on how it's used in the model paper as well. So they're sort of reading into how the model paper is referring to tables and figures and then emulating that in their own writing. So we can look to the key modals to illustrate similar things, and here I want to focus on the top key modal, will. And the word will in published writing serves a variety of different functions, and most of those functions are realized in the student corpus as well. However, there is one use of the word will where students are referring to writing that comes later in the paper, so sort of expressing futurity within the text itself, speaking to the reader's reading process. And this is also evidenced by the top bigrams and trigrams for 36200, which also illustrate this sort of use of the word will that we would associate with maybe lower level novice writing for research reports. If it appears in expert writing, it probably appears in the context of proposals or maybe in some introductory chapters of longer monographs. So what this keyword analysis ultimately shows us is that students are relying on the sample papers for linguistic phrases that they can then use to serve particular rhetorical functions that are specifically stated in the assignment prompt. It also reminds us that if we don't pair these sample papers with explicit instruction, some students might be reading some of these cues differently than other students, and some students might even be associating some of these linguistic patterns with published writing, since that's what the prompt is asking them to mimic or emulate in their own paper. So I want to close by thinking about how the keyword analysis and our DocuScope analysis and the many analyses that we will be doing moving forward can provide us with a starting point for thinking about some of the linguistic choices and patterns that characterize writing in the discipline of statistics and data science. And as we think about how we might build a pedagogy around the sample papers in 36200 in order to manage some of those different student expectations, we can also think about describing these linguistic patterns and rhetorical moves as choices within a particular discipline or genre rather than conventions, since conventions might imply some sort of standard or might invoke some more evaluative language that we might be trying to avoid depending on our pedagogical purposes. So I think this terminology becomes more important as we think about incorporating some of this corpus-based scholarship into writing pedagogy in the classroom.